everyone. How's everyone doing? Good? Enjoying all the talks and all the speakers, discussions? Nice. So I'm very excited to be here today to be talking about a subject that's very close to my heart, which is at the intersection of innovation, product development, and responsible AI. In a nutshell, so I'm Sara. I've spent the last 7-8 years working across data science, product management, more recently innovation. I'm currently an AI product manager at Enbabel, leading 2 of the new Enbabel products within the labs team. I'm also part of the Center for Responsible AI initiative, which I'll be talking later. And I'm also part of the Data Science for Social Good lead team, and some of you might know me from previous talks on that topic. Okay, about today. So I think we all understand the increasing importance of AI as a motor for product innovation, right? I think we're all in agreement. And I think we've all seen how AI can fail as well. So I'll start with the talk with 2 examples. I think everyone in the room probably has its own examples of AI failures. I'll focus on the first one. So a really sad story about a couple who was expecting a baby and they lost the baby through the pregnancy. So a really sad and difficult story. And the thing is, after that really sad event, they kept receiving notifications and advertisements about baby-related stuff, about parenting, and they went to those products to try to communicate they didn't want to receive, and it was really hard, and there wasn't a solution, and that's not really the intended, I think, the initial intention of the product they were using. Another story is I think everyone is familiar with this Amazon kind of scandal in terms of the recruitment algorithm that was biased against women. And so I wanted to start with these 2 examples because as much as we can see AI as a motor for product innovation, there's also a lot of limitation. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. And sometimes it can go really wrong. And so I think we're all here because we believe there's an increasing importance of having AI products that are responsible by design. And before I start, I just want to set expectations for the call, for the talk. So this is not a technical talk. So please bear in mind, and I'm sorry for the ones that had that expectation. I'm also not going to be presenting a magic formula that you can apply, a recipe, and in the end you'll have a 100% responsible product. I'm also not giving that to you, sorry. And why is that? Because first of all, in terms of technical terms, you could spend hours discussing this, and you'll see our other speakers talking about some of these things. We could spend hours, and I'm not really the best person to talk about that. And instead of that, what I'll be giving you today is a product perspective. So I would rather focus on how we can think about responsible AI principles, how we can think about them during the product development process, how we can measure them, and also from a personal perspective and from a Center for Responsible AI experience, what are kind of best practice we can take in consideration. Okay, so expectations agreed. I'm just sorry. I'm going to have to stop from time to time to drink water. Okay, so what's a responsible AI-driven product? It's a product that is designed, developed, and deployed having in mind responsible AI. The good news about this is that there's a lot of consensus about what responsible AI is and what are the principles of responsible AI. The not so good news, or maybe the opportunity here, is that there's a lot of room in terms of work that is being done, lots of research centers working on this to make this a reality. And there's still lots of challenges. So I also see this as a call to action for us to think about solutions here. So there's this consensus on the principles, and the first part of the talk will be about an overview of what we call these responsible AI principles. Sometimes you'll see 3 or 4. I've picked 4. I've picked 6 for this context. So I'll start with fairness. Fairness, I think everyone kind of has a broad idea what fairness is, and there are a lot of existing frameworks to measure fairness within the product. I wanted to bring today 2 dimensions of fairness. So you have fairness in terms of parity of outcomes and fairness in terms of parity of performance. And I'll try to make it concrete in terms of two different examples. So if we think about the recruitment tool, like we saw the Amazon one before, in that case, we're looking for parity of outcomes, because what we're trying to do there is trying for the product, for the tool, to be hiring at the same rate across the different groups, being men, women, or other groups. And when we think about parity of performance, like the example I want to give here is, for instance, cancer diagnosis. When we're thinking about cancer diagnosis, we don't want parity of outcomes. So we don't want female and male to be diagnosed at the same rate. That's not the point. What we want here is to be able to predict with the same level of accuracy across all groups. That's our goal here. And in terms of which dimension it matters the most to your product, it really depends on the use case and the context of the product. So this is my take on, really short, on fairness. On transparency. So I want to start by saying that transparency is not just about explainability. For me, transparency is about building trustworthy products. And what I mean by trustworthy products are products that people can trust and can understand how they work. And obviously, explainability plays an important role here, right? Because explainability allows you to understand how specific features contribute to specific outcomes. And that's really important in understanding how the product works. But we can also go beyond explainability. And some of the things that are here are just named here disclosures. So making sure that when someone is interacting with the product, they know there is an AI system behind it, or documentation, for instance. Is there reasonable documentation available for people interacting with the system to understand how it's working? So transparency covered. This one, it's around safety and security, including privacy. I'm not especially in this manner, and actually we have Inez and Fraunhofer, and we have very lucky to have in the sense that people who are working in this space. There are a lot of, this is solved for some areas, like technologies like software and robotics, less well solved for AI-specific concerns. But the good news is there are more and more, I think, research projects, open projects around the topic. And there are also some new technologies coming out, which are called, like I've learned recently, like the privacy-enhancing technologies, which are not exactly the same thing as anonymization. So the thing is, not all kind of these pets result in effective anonymization. Not all anonymization can come from pets, but pets can really help in terms of privacy. In terms of the regulatory compliance, so yesterday we had a really great session about the EU AI Act. It was really great to hear from the people working in the European Parliament about it. I think this year we've passed a really important milestone in terms of having a draft and having Europe taking this first step in terms of regulating and legislating AI. We're still far from having something that is reflected in the law. But my point here is, what does it make? What does it mean for organizations developing products? I think there's a few things we can already learn from here. So the first thing they were sharing yesterday is that we know that the AI products will be classified according to their potential risk to health, safety, and fundamental rights. So that's one thing we know. It will be based on the risk. And the other thing we know is that there'll be fines for non-compliance, and they can be quite big. So I really liked the example of the comparison we did GDPR, where suddenly everyone got affected by GDPR, and the same will happen here. So if companies and organizations don't start to prepare and don't start to kind of prepare this space and have the people try to start to educate the people and start to have this kind of education in the company, suddenly from one day to the other, you'll probably have to change your processes and change the things that you're doing. In terms of the last two, so these are kind of, for me, not the elephants in the room, but not the easiest ones to measure. In terms of social and environmental well-being, this is a key aspect. So products that, when I mean sustainability, we mean products that need less and less computing power and are more sustainable, but I want to go beyond that. So it's not just about the sustainability, it's about the real-world negative feedback loops that the product can create. And I'll go back to the example I started in the beginning. So the example about that couple that unfortunately lost the baby. And the thing is, they got really trapped in content bubbles and the product really didn't account for that example. So they were really trapped in a problem of a product that was not accounted when it was designed or developed. And so that's really important. And I'll cover a little bit what product teams can do to try to avoid this. I think one of the things they can do, obviously, is try to anticipate and think in advance what can go wrong. And the thing here is that this is not an exercise of one person, right? This is not an easy exercise. This is something that involves the whole team to think about. And just to finish the principles, focusing on accountability. So accountability is really about understanding who's accountable for at every decision point in the development process. And it's really about having auditable records of the decisions so that you can go back in case something goes wrong or in case something doesn't go as you expected. So you can go back and see why you've made that decision, who has made that decision, what was the context of that decision. And I like to see it as more like as a measuring during the process. So I see this more as accountability as a process, more than a process liability, rather than a legal liability, which is also something that is also being studied. Okay, so now that we've covered the 6 principles, let's go back to the fun part, which is, so I think, even though I don't know who's in the audience, but I think most people will be familiar with the product development lifecycle. Obviously, this is a generalization. This is applied for products that involve AI. I think everyone knows that, okay, we have the design phase, we have the development, we have the deployment phase. And my question for you is, like, how is responsible AI, how can we embed responsible AI here? And maybe, first of all, how are currently companies doing this? I don't know how, you don't have mics, but so what we've seen is something that is doing a responsible AI check-in. What do you think about this? This is good, right? Having a responsible AI check-in is good. It makes sense, right? So you've designed, you've developed, you've done that work, and before you put the product in the hands of the users and put it in the market, you do your responsible AI check-in. It sounds good. The thing is it effective? No. Why? Because the incentives are not really aligned, and the cost of change is really high. So let's go back to this. So if you look at this, by the point you do the check-in, you already had an entire product team spending time, money, making decisions, making a lot of decisions during this whole process before the check-in. And when they're doing the check-in, think about the people. The people are really excited to have the product launch. At that point, they want all the work that they've done to be launched and ready and in the hands of people. So they end up seeing this responsible AI check-in as a blocker, right? So it's good. I'm not criticizing doing this. I think this is a great step, but I think we can do better. And so what I'm proposing today is doing something slightly different. So instead of doing a responsible AI check-in before deployment, let's thinking it's something you do throughout the cycle. And I know this sounds super nice, but yeah, Sara, how do you do this on the day-to-day? Like, this is just adding work to all these phases. It's already, people are already working super hard. How do we do this? So I'll spend the rest of the talk giving you some tips about, well, what we've seen working. And to be honest, and I have some people from my team here, like, this is something we're learning. I'm not saying I'm applying this 100% in our products, but I think we're learning. Let's look at this. So for instance, during design, the design phase is about identifying and measuring risk of the product use case. So what can you do in this phase in terms of responsible AI? You can think about who's going to be impacted. Think about all the indirect and direct users of the product, people who will be affected by the product. What are the potential negative impacts on those people and on those groups? And for that, I invite you to bring user researchers, people that go and talk to users and do research and talk to them and to really embed the users in the design process. Well, another point is taking into consideration the regulatory context. So are there any rules, regulations, standards that need to be followed for your specific use case? And the last one is, okay, what are, how can we measure and how can we mitigate these possible negative impacts and desired impacts of the product? So this is during design, and there's a lot of things here. And I also wanted to link to, I don't know if you've seen João's Ascensão talk yesterday about AI product management. And he said something that resonated to me, which is he sees the AI product manager as the forest safeguard, right? I think it was the expression, or the voice of the user. So if you look at this and you are an AI PM, you say, well, great, but this is an incredible amount of things to have in mind and to do. So see it not as something that you need to have all the answers, but see it as something that you need to inspire and bring to the team and really engage the team in answering these questions. So yeah, this is at least how I see it as a product manager. Let's move into development. So when we move into development, we move into prioritizing responsible AI metrics during training and testing. And this, I think, Nuno, and we'll be talking a little bit, but like, how can we include responsible AI metrics in your objective function and optimize for most performant models that meet these responsible AI requirements? An important thing here, don't just evaluate your model, evaluate your data, and do it before the model level. There's a couple of things here. Again, document and document your decisions. Make sure, again, related to the point of transparency and accountability. And so, as you've seen, there's a lot of things you can do before deployment. And this is where the point where most organizations are doing the check-in is right now, before deployment. But you can also do things during the deployment phase. So here it's about monitoring, right? I think we've all seen the importance of monitoring, of conducting regular audits, of conducting regular stress tests. And a really important point that I wanted to call the attention, and we were just commenting before the talk, is really to build responsible AI feedback mechanisms. That's something that it doesn't come in the first version of the product, and I think this is something we are aiming to do in the products, at least the ones I'm involved, but make sure that at some point in your product, you have room for the user to give you feedback, and to make sure that that feedback is put back in the model, because that's really important. Otherwise, you're keeping the human totally out of the loop, and you might have you might not be accounting for these undesired outputs. And then have a plan if something goes wrong. It seems easy, but it's not that easy, but it should be here. All right, so lot of information. I'm sorry. So I'm just about to wrap up. So I just wanted to kind of bring this all together. And if people ask, okay, what did you learn from Sara's talk today? I wanted to give you three messages. One is, well, we've all seen that responsible AI check-ins before deployment, it's okay, but it's not effective. So please try to embed it as much as possible during the development process of your products. The second thing is AI is everywhere, right? Is everywhere literally, but people are everything. And I really like this because I think if you don't invest in a diverse team, if you don't include your team in this conversation, as a PM, you won't get anywhere and you won't be able to build everything that we've just talked. So invest in people, invest in education, invest in conversations. And that's my last point, is that this is all, well, from product perspective, but also from technical perspective, this is a field that is pretty much a work in progress. And so it's natural for people to know, sometimes not knowing and being a bit scary of talking about these issues. And that's one of the reasons why we also have the Center for Responsible AI, is that we see in the different partners we have, and I know there's Visor there's Unbabel, there's Sword, there's Fraunhofer, there's research centers here, is that you can really only learn from talking. So my third advice is really join these conversations, share your challenges, because in the products I've seen, the challenges that people are facing when they are implementing AI are the same. And no one has all the solutions figured out yet, right? So let's share. Those are my kind of 3 takeaways. And I'll invite you to join the conversation. We have lots of startups, research centers, and industry leaders in Portugal, in one of the biggest consortiums in the world about responsible AI. So join the conversation. We'll have a really interesting event in 25th of November in Champalimau Foundation in Lisbon. So join us for that. And let's keep in touch and continue the conversation. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so we have some questions for Sara here in Sara. We have here in the, in the tablet. Change your name. Okay, so I really like this one. So where can we find the guide of best practices for every step and examples that can help us fully integrate these practices in our development? Is there any best practices book? Is there a tool that you usually use? Do you think the current project management tools respond to these requirements?
Well, I've done my best trying to condense all the knowledge that I've brought together today. I think it's a good challenge for me and for the team who unfortunately can't be here today, but I think we can create some best practices based on our learning. We can start to do this. We still have a long way until 2025 to finish this project, so lots of learnings. I think there are already some tools out there, some guidelines. Well, that's such a personal challenge for me, maybe to put it together and share with other people. In terms of regulation, for instance, I was checking yesterday, there's already some kind of assessments you can run to see how you're doing in terms of products. And in terms of ethics, which is a different dimension, we were having a workshop the other day. I know there are also some assessments you can run on your product. I don't have them, I don't know them by heart, but I can, well, Model Cars is one of them, but there are many. I can share with you afterwards the names.
Thank you. So another question we have here is related with parity of outcome. How do we define when is it important and in which variables? If a variable is a good predictor, how to decide if that is due to previous bias or is actually a feature of the problem? And then decide if we want to use that.
Sorry, I don't think I'll need to.
So parity of outcome related. So how to know if a variable is working well, helping the model, getting good performance results because it's biased or because it's really explaining the problem?
It's a good question.
It's
Not
a
sure.
difficult one, right? It will depend a little bit on the problem as well, right?
Yeah, it depends on the problem. Yeah, well, I'm not sure.
Okay. So we have here also regarding fairness. So if we expect that the fair model becomes unfair with time, so on monitoring fairness, do you think this may happen?
Yeah, well, it all, yeah, obvious. The answer is yes, and I think it's one of the things about that I insisted on monitoring is that, well, I hope the models are not static, right? And more they're not static, and they live off data, and I think new biases and new things can happen. So it's about monitoring. Like if you have new data coming in, you have new problems coming out. So this is not, in a way, that's the reason why I don't like checklists, because if you do a checklist, it seems like it's solved for the rest of the product, and the product is a living thing, right? So in a way, yeah, it's a checklist for that moment, but you need to revisit later and run it again, I think I would say, yeah. Because if you have new data, it doesn't mean that the new data will bring different problems.